Hello and welcome to the Natsu Banzuke podcast from Team Tachiai. Joining me from the East Coast of the United States is Tachiai founder Andy. Say hello.
Hey, everybody.
And also the guy who's typically our man in foreign lands, but is now firmly rooted on the West Coast of the United States. Hi, Josh.
Hey, guys. How you going?
So, as all of you know, we are starting this podcast with a bit of the unknown. We don't know exactly if the Natsu Basho is actually going to happen. The decision on that is not going to happen until May the 6th, but the Banzuke, for Natsu, was released this past Monday in Japan, and so Team Tachiai is going to talk about it a little bit, but first let's get into the news. Currently, a state of emergency in Japan that has caused all manner of events to be suspended, canceled, or otherwise delayed. Right now, it seems to be impacting Sumo as well. The Rikishi aren't practicing full power or full contact. Andy, I know you have some thoughts about this, but what do you think?
Well, I wish everywhere had more testing so that we could actually figure out who has had it. I know around here you can't get tested unless you have symptoms and had confirmed cases near you or had traveled, and so it's been. I mean, if you don't have symptoms, great. You're going around there and kind of potentially passing it along to everybody else. So that's where the social distancing and everything comes in. But that's not really possible in the communal setting of a heya.
Yeah, that's right.
And now I do know that the state of emergency in Japan, they've locked down travel a bit more. They banned travelers from Europe, the U.S., China, South Korea, but they just added Russia and 13 other countries to that list. So they're doing what they can to try to lock down the country. And I do know I've got some friends who they had been living here and they went back. They were required to have COVID tests in the when they got there, quarantined for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then hotels have been blocking or who have been denying reservations to people who had been in the U.S. So they've been kind of scrambling for where to stay while they try to get home.
Wow.
But Kochi's, I just reported on Kochi, but their Yosakoi festival in August was just canceled.
Wow. All the way out to August, huh?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Hopefully, if Natsu happens, we're just the sumo world, and I know that some of the world sports have been talking about, like the Premier League and the Bundesliga have been talking about how many people they really need to have in a stadium and trying to limit it to 200 of the essentials. But we'll see if that can possibly happen with sumo, even without fans or anything.
Wow.
But that festival would be a mass festival where everybody would be coming in, and so it's a little bit different than
August is a long way away.
Yeah, no, exactly. That means I think a lot of you can really write off a lot of the public events. Concerts, shoot, those aren't going to happen for any time soon.
So, Josh, you're probably the most accomplished world traveler I know, and you were in Osaka, hopefully to watch the Haru Basho, which, we all know had no spectators. Some thoughts about what was going on at the time?
Yeah, well, I didn't get to watch it. Just unfortunately, like everybody else, I was watching it on TV. It was really weird. I think not just in regards to sumo, but if you look back a couple months, it was an odd time. And to put it in context, the last time we all got together and we did one of these podcasts before the Haru Basho, there weren't any of these stay-at-home orders in place. A lot of stuff that Andy just mentioned was, so far away at that point. It was more we were thinking about what could happen as opposed to what actually has happened. And there was a growing fear and people were canceling travel. So Osaka was just kind of bizarre because at that point, locals were still very much going about their business. But, since the big difference is that there were no tourists since everybody had canceled their plans. So, pretty much all the cultural centers were closed. All the tourist spaces were closed, in addition to Sumo being off limits to tourists and to ticket holders. And I think, as a tourist in that atmosphere, it was actually amazing because you didn't have to wait in line to get into great restaurants, but the small businesses that were there were hit already at that time really hard.
Yeah.
You could go to Kuroma Nichiba Market, which usually is just wall to wall with tourists, especially during Basho time. Everyone's coming into Osaka, and you're getting Kobe beef at half price simply because there isn't any foot traffic. It was completely empty. So, you compare that with 2019, it was just crazy. So, obviously, my heart goes out to folks trying to operate in those markets, other small businesses, because, to Andy's point, when you talk about all those events that are getting canceled months and months down the line, the Olympics and everything else, Japan worked so hard to increase the number of tourists for up to 2020, almost to the breaking point infrastructure-wise. And then that goes almost overnight down to virtually zero. In terms of the Basho, at that time in Osaka, there were still posters around town. The venue had very limited signage. Folks were obviously watching on TV, either at home or in bars. We went to a whiskey bar, and there were plenty of folks at the bar speculating on whether or not Hakuho was fit or his Keiko was good enough. And obviously, we found out that it was. So, that was Osaka.
Wow. Just a side note, my son, now that Waki Ichiro has retired, like he's not even 3 yet, his favorite rikishi is now Hakuho, right? And he knows that there's supposed to be a Basho coming up, so he comes to me now, he goes, Sumo! I'm like, oh no, what do I tell the kid? So as mentioned at the top of the podcast, on May the 6th, they're going to decide, the NSK is going to decide whether or not the Basho will go ahead. And I think one of the key influence of that is that Takatagawa Heiya has a number of confirmed cases of the pandemic, including the stable master himself, I think, was at least temporarily hospitalized. And for fans who aren't quite as into the different stables, that's where Kageyaki and Ryuden are that's their stable. Right, so there are a number of sekitori, including also a number of lower-ranked wrestlers. And if you haven't really examined what it's like to live in a heiya, it's a bunch of guys, some of them quite large, living in very close quarters, much like you would inside of a naval vessel. They sleep in the same spot, they eat in the same spot, they train in the same spot, and now, with the NSK rules, they are more or less confined to that one little building. So if one of them gets sick, it's a perfect way to spread that disease around. Andy, thoughts about the situation?
Well, and it's particularly interesting for guys who are sekitori because what you really want to be able to do is isolate somebody if they're infected, and sekitori might have that possibility because and
right.
higher ranked wrestlers might have that possibility if they've got their own room. Hakuho will, guys who are like Hakuho, who are able to afford their own places and stay in their own lodging, they'll be able to self-isolate. But when you've got lower ranked rikishi and the stable master, I wonder how many of the other staff might have gotten it. it's very tricky to isolate unless you send them and you put them all in the hospital. And that's where we're still trying to figure out what happened to the first case.
Right.
Like, if he's still in the hospital to be isolated, I mean, you look at the timeline, and yeah, this thing can last 3 weeks, depending on how bad, and potentially even a little bit longer. So, they hopefully would be able to keep this contained, but I think that when we saw that tweet from Naruto Bea of everybody there in that one room together, you just and that's not the first one that he's sent out. He's sent out several more where they're maybe in the Keikoba and they're all doing stretches and stuff. It's non-contact, but they're all there together.
Right.
There's no real way to escape it. So like you said, it's just the fact that one case happened in that one and stayed isolated was really, really the big surprise to me. But I mean, flukes do happen.
Allow me to interrupt you. I had heard back when that first case happened that it was a rikishi from Takadagawa, but it was told to me in confidence, and I didn't put it on the blog or anything. So I don't know if this is a continuation of that or what happened. But I'd like to pivot because Andy brought up a really good subject, is that the rikishi aren't sparring. They aren't doing any contact. They aren't doing anything other than basic movement. And Josh, you've spent a good amount of time watching practice at the Heia. Even if they decided to move ahead with Natsu, it's unlikely anyone's in any condition to fight at this point. What would you say to that?
I'd say I think it's really interesting because, over the past several years, not only us, all of us, and a lot of people who comment on our site and on other sites always go, well, maybe they should just take some time off and heal up and rest up, and maybe they should, do other things. And now all of a sudden we're in that moment.
Yes, we are.
And it'll be really interesting to see how people are using this time. And we'll get on to some specific guys that I know we all want to talk about a little bit later, who are interesting cases coming back from injury or people who are on the way up. And, we just always talk about this, what if they could just manage it better? And is the sumo lifestyle as we know it, conducive to actually maintaining health? And you talk to, people who are close to sumo and in the sumo media, and they say, well, you're never fully healthy. You fight injured all the time. So that's really what I'm looking forward to the most, is just kind of seeing how people transition, come out of this period. We've seen video in the past few weeks of Miyagi no Bea and Hakuho training Ishiura and Enho in the street. And, they're still getting on with their strength training. I don't know how old that video was, but, hopefully guys are finding different ways to maintain their fitness.
I hope
and
so.
Yeah, what that looks like will be really interesting.
Really hope so. Okay, so let's close out the news section with a bit of reaction amongst the three of us that are on. We'll start with you, Josh. Natsu Basho, go or no go? No.
I think, with Oyakata and Sekitori being infected, there's probably plenty more infections than we're aware of, just due to the nature of this, and people being symptomless, as Andy said. I don't think it'll go ahead. And I think the shame for me is that of the 3 Tokyo tournaments, I love this tournament. And the reason why is that usually you have the Golden Week celebrations leading up to it. You have Rikishi serving Chanko in the streets around Kokugi-kan. Sometimes you have an open, last year it wasn't, but sometimes you have an open soken for, as you mentioned a minute ago, Bruce, for fans to go watch training for free. The Doyo Matsuri, which I know you went to in January and wrote about. The Banzuke announcement, the portrait unveiling. So this is probably the richest time in the annual calendar to be a sumo fan. So from that perspective, it's a shame. I think to go back to a point you made a second ago, no matter what you say, even if Yuden or Kagayaki gets a clean bill of health, you talk about Hakuyozan, I believe was the Sekitori who was potentially infected. If his stablemates can be infected, it's going to be on the minds of guys who draw him.
That's right.
Draw Ryuden and Kagayaki in the Torikumi, right? guys in lower divisions aren't going to want to fight guys from stables that have had people who have been infected. And I know the Kyokai is not famous for minding the feelings of Rikishi, but I don't know that in that situation how you can hold a tournament. And I thought holding the Osaka Basho behind closed doors at the time was the right thing to do, and I still think it was the right thing to do. But I also think that canceling this tournament is probably the right thing to do.
So, Andy, let's go to you for opinion. Do you think there's going to be a Natsu in any way, shape, or form?
No. I think that Natsu will be actually in the summer this year at Nagoya. I think that we will get a Nagoya, likely without fans, as we're seeing some of the other leagues. That's the thing. There is a big push to get out. I mean, being in our homes is not. It was boring 8 weeks ago, and I mean, it's much more boring now, and so there is that push to be able to go out there, or at least if we are stuck here, be able to turn on the TV and watch some sports or do see something. Everything has been canceled, and so if they are able to, I think that there will be a push to open it up and to have it without fans. But as far as Natsu goes, I do think that it's too early. But I do think that Nagoya is going to be crazier than ever, because we're going to have a lot of Rikishi who are healed up. I think that this looks really, really good for Takakeisho and Mitakeumi, guys who've had these little lingering issues that you just feel like some extra rest would be able to help them heal up. Maybe Takayasu comes back and gets himself back up into the Sanyaku. I don't know, and I really wonder what would have happened if this had happened maybe a year or two ago when Kisano Sato was around.
Yep.
And if he'd been able to actually get that rest. But we won't know until they actually get back on the dohyo.
So I'll close out by saying I sadly agree with you guys, although I just have this sneaking suspicion that there will be something, even if it's a token ceremony, that will take place in order for the Sumo Kyokai to mark the event. Just because, I don't know, it seems to me that they should be able to do something to say, we're not going to actually do the tournament, but we're still here. So with that, let's pivot on to the Banzuke itself. So the Banzuke dropped early Monday morning. Of course, for those of us in the U.S., we get it Saturday afternoon/evening. And our very own LK Sumo won the Guess the Banzuke contest this time, which I think may be his first time. The guy is a verifiable genius and has really been a true treasure to the site with his prognostication, which always just impresses the daylights out of me. But I think the big headline on this is, of course, our Shin-Ozeki Asanoyama. So, Josh, some thoughts on Asanoyama, if you would.
Yeah, sure. I think you can say that maybe his promotion came a bit soon. He notched up 32, I think it was, over the past 3 tournaments. But clearly it was felt that Sumo needed him to step up and be the new Ozeki, and that it was time to push through that change with only one Kadoban Ozeki on the books. And I think most people at this point will feel that he probably has the highest ceiling outside the current Yokozuna, who are obviously at the top. And it's not. I'm not saying that just because Takakeisho is Kadoban, but I think Asanoyama just has more in his locker. A lot of the real hopes of Rikishi hopes over the last few years have faded quite badly. And so while I personally, I think, would have wanted to see another Basho for him to really punch that ticket with authority, I can understand why it's happened now. And I hope that he goes on where others have failed to really challenge for more Yusho this year and in the coming years.
So I agree with what you say. And I admit this is kind of a touchy-feely sort of approach to it. My concern is that the photographs that have emerged of Asanoyama following his promotion is that he's stone-faced. He's serious. He's got the responsibility of the Ozeki rank on his shoulders now, and you can clearly see it. But up to this point, and this is one of the things that really attracted me to him as a Rikishi, is that he was always happy. He was always seemed to even have the hint of a smile on his face, like, can you believe I'm up on the dojo fighting these guys? This is amazing. But now he's like stone-faced Ozeki, and I just hope his love of sumo is still there, even if he feels that it's inappropriate to show it now. But let's pivot on to someone who for a long time was tagged as an Ozeki hopeful, and really almost became a parody, but somehow this guy came roaring back. Andy, talk to us about Shodai.
He is actually somebody else who has had 32 wins over the last 3 tournaments, which is a little bit of a surprise, but one of them was at the very low rank of Maegashira 10, because he did drop down a little bit, but he had a great tournament. Just to jog everybody's memory, not this past tournament, but the tournament before, he had a great tournament where he was in the Yusho race with Tokushoryu until he unfortunately stumbled there toward the end.
Tokushoryu. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, and I feel bad for Tokushoryu, because now that his moment up there in the joy has gone, I hope his I hope he doesn't fade off into the sunset.
Oh, he's having a great time and he's making money. What more could you want at this point?
I do hope that that he sticks around for a little bit longer, and I mean that he is at least a solid Maegashira and doesn't I guess fall out of the fall into Juryo anytime soon.
So on the subject of Shodai, I guess he's been under Kakuryu's tutelage quite heavily now recently, and we're starting to see signs of sort of Kakuryu's sumo show up in Shodai. Want to comment on that, Andy?
I just hope he is able to, preserve his unique style.
Unique style.
and prevent, I guess, the lower body issues that Kakuryu has had. But he's got a pretty good rivalry going there with Asanoyama, and so I'm really hoping that him seeing Asanoyama being promoted might just turn up that fire a little bit.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We're gonna see, but probably not in May.
Well, the thing is, we need a new crop of Ozeki, because we've got 4 of them down there at the bottom of
We're getting to that.
And so we've got this history of weak Ozeki, so it would be nice to get some consistency there.
All right, Josh, talk me off the ledge. Shodai, come on.
I mean, listen, I kind of echo a bit of what Andy was getting at, that I think it's good for the sport to have somebody, especially somebody who has who is really touted at the beginning of his career as a real talent, and has just not displayed the consistency that you would hope of someone to get to that level. It's someone that I was referring to a few minutes ago when we were talking about Asanoyama, of this past hopes that have kind of faded, and unlike a few other people, he's taken the opportunity to rocket back into position, and he's competing in an era where it's not, I don't want to belittle the achievements of anybody, but it's not hugely difficult to come down from Maegashira 10 or 13 or whatever to make your way up there. Like you said, we just saw Tokushoryu do it. So fingers crossed he can just hang on at that level and show us a bit more of what he's made of.
Yeah, well, good luck to Shodai. I do like to bust on him because he fails to live up to his potential in the past. But if he can pull it together and he can make a run, I'll be cheering him on. I want to talk a little bit about Mitakeumi. So Mitakeumi spent a very long time in the Sanyaku. He was super consistent. He was never outstanding, but he was super consistent. He won 2 Yusho. He's back at Sekiwake now, at Sekiwake East. His second Yusho was 2019 Aki, and then he went 6-9 and 7-8, 2 Makikoshi in a row, and then bounced back with 10-5 in Osaka. Josh, thoughts about Mitakeumi? Is he touch and go now, or do you think he can get back in the saddle? He's seen 2 younger Rikishi pass him by for Ozeki.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been questions about him. So from a mental perspective, I was at that Aki tournament where he won the Yusho in the playoff over Takakeisho. It was a great performance from him, certainly. But, when he had everybody looking at him, as you mentioned, he obviously fell away in quite significant style.
Yes.
I mean, the issue with him is that when he gets to this level, he had displayed some consistency, and that he was a little bit of what we call a flat track bully. He'd beat up on those guys who were lower down the Banzuke from him when he was a Sekiwake, and he would always really struggle into that second week when he'd have to fight guys that were higher up. And that's the benefit of being in that rank, is that you don't have to really fight the better guys until you get into that second week. And then over those tournaments after he won his Yusho, he wasn't able to even do that in the first week.
Yep.
So, I mean, unfortunately, I just think it's a bit of a dice roll with him. Who's going to turn up at this point? He's getting later in his career than he was when it was all kind of coming together for him. But he still got the fans.
And he's got to he's taken in a few injuries that you have to wonder if he ever really recovered from. So Andy, any thoughts about Mitakeumi?
Well, it's really those injuries that I think this is his opportunity to kind of hopefully get over them, because like you said, he had that really, really long stretch of being in Sanyaku, but unfortunately he dropped off there. And if they do already, without having Jungyos and without having full contact practice, I'm hopeful that whatever had been plaguing him in the previous tournaments to this last one may be resolved, and so he'll be able to get those key wins in the second week.
Yep.
But we'll see.
So talking about falling down the Banzuke, let's talk about Terunofuji. I'm sure as soon as we actually get onto a tournament, Terunofuji is going to attract a lot of attention. He's back in the top division. Former Ozeki, got injured, dropped far down the Banzuke, and battled his way back to the top division. He still looks like he's not necessarily in the best condition. Upper body is pretty solid now, but both knees heavily bandaged. Any thoughts about Terunofuji?
Like you said, he's back, but I'm not sure that Darth Vader is back. I mean, he came in originally on that Ozeki run. He was fierce. He's trying to bring some of that back, but it'll be difficult to see that. I guess it used to look like he was set for Yokozuna,
right.
And I'm not sure that his knees and his current condition will top him out there. I'm thinking that it might top him out around where he is.
Yes, I worry about that too.
I'm hopeful that I'm wrong. I really, really, really want to be wrong, because he seems to really enjoy sumo, and he seems to really enjoy dominating people on the dohyo, and I'd like to see that back. But as we've seen with other guys like Tochino Shin, who rely on a lot of that raw power, that it does take a toll, and I'm eager to see how long he can stay around. I'm happy to see him up there.
All right, so fans around the world love a comeback story, and right now Terunofuji, he gets a lot of cheers during Doyo Iri. At least he did in January. There were no cheers in March. But people were pulling for him. You could see it on Twitter. You could see it on Facebook. You could see it on the you could see it on the chat boards. Thoughts about Terunofuji? Is he going to be able to hit and stick? You think, Josh?
Yeah, I think it's good to see him back. I think it's a great story, and I really thought he was done. I mean, I didn't subscribe to any of this resurgence of the kaiju stuff. Let's be clear. This has not been a storming return to form, but he has enough skill, and, to Andy's point, sometimes he has enough power to be able to see off the opposition that he has been up against. Yep. And so the real story now is how far he can go. And I think he's someone who can still, even if he stays around this rank, as Andy said, or it goes a little higher, he's still someone who can have a reasonable career for the short-term future. And whenever the next tournament is, I think that a Kachikoshi would be a good result.
It would be a great result.
Yeah, and hopefully he's able to do sensible training with the time off, manage his physical condition in a more ideal way, but time will tell.
Time will tell. All right, I want to pivot to another story, which is Enho in March was at his highest rank, and as so often the case, comes down to the final weekend, still looking for win number 8, and came up short. So, Josh, share some thoughts about Enho. He's got a huge following, and rightly so. I think the guy has a lot of potential, but where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I think it's a great time, with him dropping down the Banzuke a little bit, to take a second and just think about how remarkable it is that at every step in his development, at least since he's reached the Sekitori ranks, pundits and people online and wherever else would say this is surely a step too far for Enho. And yet he's defied everyone and somehow find his way, each of those times, he found his way to an even higher level. So this time he's taken a step back, and he will take more steps back at points in the future. His sumo is not perfect. Many times when you stop his mobility, his ability to move around and confuse people and grab people from areas they don't want to be touched, that's when you stop him, But he still continues to improve. And, like I said, there's a video earlier of him getting the strength training from Hakuho that I think was really interesting. And I'll be curious if we end up going 4 or 6 months, in what I think most people would call worst case scenario between tournaments, how much stronger will he look the next time that we see him? His improvement also seems to have improved Ishiura, as we saw.
Yes. That was interesting.
And it's kind of a similar story. Andy's, you referenced the sort of rivalry Shodai and Asanoyama, and whether that's just Ishiura having a stronger training partner, or the fact that this is a motivating factor for him. Right. Maybe this is something that makes them both better. So I think despite Enho's Makekoshi and falling down, I think that where he's at now is a manageable level, and I'm looking forward to see where he goes next.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about it. Okay, I want to touch on one more, because we're talking about smaller Rikishi who generate a lot of excitement, and I would be remiss if I did not bring up Ura, who is now on his second attempt to return. He's broken back into Makushita. I think he's Makushita 25 now, after just completely obliterating several sets of lower-ranked Rikishi. Andy, he still has problems with those knees, but his upper body it looks like it's been grafted on from a gorilla. The guy is huge. He breaks grip strength meters. I've heard that he can bench press 200 kilograms or something like that. Thoughts about Ura?
When you watch him, it seems like the people up against him do not want to be up against him. If they're much bigger.
Well, he does have two kinboshi, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. Like he is thick, and I mean, like you said, his upper body is well, you were talking about Enho and his I guess workouts and trying to develop his strength training. That may be where Ura has already been, and Ura has been able to pack on quite a lot of girth there and muscles that And
The guy's
but
nuts.
he's constrained now. His knees. We'll see when he gets up to a level where guys actually have the skill of an Enho, because I mean Enho came up winning Yusho, and he's been able to get almost to Minomi capped out at Komusubi. Enho hasn't gotten there yet, but he might. As far as Ura, like he's already got the injury. I mean, and so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to be as successful
Yep.
against guys who have that skill. And those are two guys who are pretty small. If you're talking about somebody who's pretty tall, like a Hakuho or even a Terunofuji, I, I think I'm waiting for Ura to really hit that Makushita joy, and get into that churn where the guys are really going at it because they want to be Sekitori.
Yep.
And it just the skill and the desire really seems to just go up a level there. And I'm very eager to see him hit it and see what he can do there.
Okay, Josh, thoughts about Ura? We love the guy. Do you think he can make a comeback?
Well, I thought earlier when you said he's obliterated several sets of opponents that you were going to say he's obliterated several sets of knees.
Yes, that's true.
I thought that's where you were going.
Yeah, I should have. That's a good one.
He's another great story. It's worth remembering he was the super exciting hype before Enho a few years ago now. And, he comes back twice now. I think it's a good thing that he's outside that sort of automatic 7-0 promotion zone inside Makushita, top 15 ranks, because he can probably benefit from a couple more tournaments where he doesn't have to go 15 days. Obviously you guys mentioned what he looks like now physically. It's really hard to know what to expect from a comeback of a guy like this outside the top 3 divisions, because, as you mentioned, his ability, he's fighting guys in Jonidan and Sandame, is so far ahead of the competition that he's been facing. Now he's going to start to suit up against higher quality opposition again, probably even at the rank that he's at now. Guys that have either been up close to that Sekitori line and not made it and fallen down, or other guys that have had injury issues but are still a certain quality. So whenever we do see him, whether that's in a couple weeks or a couple months, he's certainly going to be one to watch.
Okay, well, there's two other stories that I think really stick out in the Banzuke. One is, for lack of a better term, I'll refer to as the Ozeki scrap heap. We've got Takayasu, Koto Shogiku, Terunofuji, and Tochi Shin, all sort of loitering down in the bottom half of the Banzuke. All of them with injuries, all of them a fraction of their former power. Josh, do you want to take on the Ozeki scrap heap with a comment or two?
Yeah, let's get into it. So I know you're a big Takayasu fan, and we've spent a decent amount of this podcast talking about reclamation stories. But to me, this has to be the saddest story of all of them. At least if you look at Koto Shogiku, he won a storied Yusho. I mean, that was an incredible moment. He had a very long tenure as an Ozeki. The other guys were not great Ozeki. Like, let's not romanticize it. But Takayasu had a career of expectation, and I'm not sure where and how his story ends. I think it's also a good time to point out he gets injured again in the last tournament, and again the Kyokai, you wouldn't call them a medical team, but the Kyokai team in charge of looking after someone being injured on the dohyo, with 0 spectators this time to move out of the way. This is not like a Tomokaze situation where there's like all these spectators gawping at an injured Rikishi who's fallen down and we got to move him out of the way and get the wheelchair in there. There's nobody to move out of the way. They still fail to provide him adequate, timely medical attention.
And with no crowd noise to cover up the horrific sounds he was making.
Yeah, it's outrageous. So, look, I think looking far into the future, I think, there will be a Kabu for him, I'm sure. Ozeki can stay in the sport as a coach for 2 years anyway. I wouldn't worry about his long-term future, but I worry about his short-term future. At this point. I'd be surprised if someone like him with a series of horrible injuries as a former Ozeki took the L and dropped into Makushita rather than going Intai. It's worth remembering Terunofuji was a lot younger when he lost his Ozeki status and tumbled out. And he's at a different point of his career. So he's the one, Takayasu, that I'm most worried about in the short term.
All right, Andy, thoughts about the Ozeki scrap heap down there in the lower half of the Banzuke?
I had forgotten about the or repressed that memory. I think I had mentioned earlier that I thought that Takayasu would benefit from some time off. I had forgotten about that little scandal because I wasn't the last tournament. I wasn't exactly watching 100%, but and I couldn't bring myself to watch after reading after reading your coverage, and I could not bring myself to watch that one. I don't know if
it's preserved forever on YouTube. Thank you, Jason.
I don't think I'll ever be able to bring myself to watch that.
It's grim. It's grim. But so we've got Takayasu, who I think it was Nagoya of 2019, suffered that arm breaker Kotanagi with Tamawashi, and then he I think blew out one of his knee tendons in March. I mean, the guy is plagued with injuries,
and that's where I was like, oh, he finally gets time to heal, and I forgot about that. But I do think that of these four, I think Koto Shogiku is maybe the one with who has, I guess, the longer ride to the horizon.
I don't know. Come on, Koto Shogiku has had 4 straight Makekoshis, and somehow, after going 2 straight 7 and 8s, the guy is still Meiji 12.
Yeah, he's still hanging around there. He's clawing at it. And he is not going to give up without a fight. I guess the last couple of tournaments, I've seen him actually try to get away from not necessarily the hug and chug, and actually trying to put some technique into there. But I think that Tochino Shin, I'll be very, very interested to see where Gagamaru go. I think that those guys are pretty tight, and if Gagamaru drops down, or if he goes Intai, because I think he's been Kyujo for a couple of tournaments, I think that may precipitate an earlier exit from Tochino Shin than any of us want. And then I'm still kind of what's the word? I have a lot of trepidation about Terunofuji's return, because I really, really, really want him to do well, but I am also very worried about his needs. So.
All right, so you brought up Koto Shogiku. I misspoke. He's Majishira 14, not 12. But I guess the last subject in our Banzuke discussion is the Sadogatake logjam at the bottom of the Banzuke. There's one at Majishira 17, 16, 15, 14, and 13. So Koto Yuki, Koto Eko, Koto Shoho, Koto Shogiku, and Koto no Waka. How on earth is this scheduling team going to cope with 5 Rikishi from the same stable who can't face each other? Josh, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, credit to Sadogatake for managing a generational transition, possibly even more successfully than Isagama. We talked about how well he had done it at transitioning. And it's great also for Koto no Waka to emerge as the Heiagashira already. When you look at some of the names there, Koto Shogiku's been around forever. Guys like Koto Yuki, who when fit can still get decent results. Fitness has been his problem. I've been impressed with Koto Shoho as he moved quite quickly through Juryo. Both Koto Shoho and Koto Nowaka were really, really hyped as recruits.
Yep.
Koto Nowaka, obviously, is the son of the stable master, grandson of a Yokozuna. It's going to make things really interesting, as you say, for the Torikumi committee, and more interesting for those of us who eventually get to watch, because I think Koto Nowaka is a little bit more varied of the two. When you talk about his technique, Koto Shoho still relies a lot more on pushing and thrusting. Technically, I put his Koto Nowaka's ceiling then a little bit higher, but right now it's tough to say there's a ceiling on either of those guys until we get to see more of them at this level. But yeah, it's really, really exciting, and hopefully the other veterans from the stable can do well as well.
Okay. Andy, over to you. We've got got enough Kodo salami to stock a deli. What do you think?
I think that we'll see a lot more head scratcher matchups on Senshuraku and possibly even earlier, because Okinomi, I don't know if you remember, he's in the Joy and somehow faced Kodo Shogiku on Senshuraku last tournament.
Right.
And so I think that we will have the scheduling committee will run out of matchups for these guys down at the bottom, and we will see some very interesting matchups again. I wouldn't be surprised if Kodo Shogiku faces some more Sanyaku once again. Well, probably not Sanyaku.
That poor old guy.
But faces somebody else from the Joy, and some familiar faces. We might have some good reunions or something.
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to bring our discussions for this episode to a close. Stay with Tachiai. We will bring you information as we approach May 6th on the fate of the Natsu Basho. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Andy, for joining me. And everyone, remember, for Sumo, it's Tachiai.